Welcome to The Big Picture. I'm Phil Arno. In today's world, it's hard to get away from politics. We're all affected by government, local, state, federal. If you're on social media or you watch cable news, maybe read what used to be called a newspaper, or just have a friendly conversation over dinner or a drink, politics is going to come up. For the average person, there's a certain degree of frustration. As much as we're affected by what goes on with government officials, there's a feeling that it's out of our control. Voters often say, one vote won't make a difference. Voter turnout traditionally is very low. For example, in New York City, the election for mayor drew a record high turnout of voters. Record high. Even so, the total number of people who voted in that election compared to those eligible to vote was less than 40%. So Mayor Mondami was actually elected with about 50% of maybe 38% of the voters. That's about 19% of all the people who could have voted. Folks, I know it's frustrating, but the direction of politics is threatening to change the very nature of the United States. If that doesn't scare you, I'm not sure what would. If not for ourselves, we owe it to our children and their children to make sure that our country continues to be the best version of itself going forward. And it isn't just national politics or New York City or some place in Maine I'm talking about. It starts locally and for us in Albany. On today's show, we're going to have a discussion with one candidate for one office in the state. Again, there's no bad place to start making good decisions. With me on this show is Terry McGuire. Terry is running for New York State Assembly from Amherst. This is not necessarily an endorsement, and equal time rules say as an opponent is entitled to come on as well to have a conversation. But for now, we get to have a little food for thought on one race here in Western New York from one candidate, and maybe even a little bit of a broader outlook on what's going on in politics. So welcome to the show, Terry.
Phil, thank you so much for having me here.
Good to have you here.
Thank you.
First of all, for the people out there who are not familiar with you, tell me a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I grew up in the Eggersville-Snyder area, Roycroft Boulevard, one of the greatest places to ever grow up in America, period. And I have to say I had kind of like a idyllic growing up. It's almost like it was Leave It to Beaver. You know, you had the barbershop guy, you had the post office guy, it was really great growing up in Eggersville-Snyder and being a graduate of Amherst Central High School. It was fantastic, and you know, it was an interesting journey when I was in high school and looking at options with a college career. I decided maybe to join the military, and I looked into West Point and applied. Didn't get in the first time, but went to the West Point prep school. And I remember the day Dad dropped me off down at the bus station, and basically I was on the road team for about 11 years until I finally came back to Western New York after graduating West Point, joining the Army, did a couple of combat tours, and some time at the Pentagon. So it was an interesting mix of being on active duty and the reserve system, IRR, individual Red Reserve, and making our way back. But it's been a great experience. I've had a lot of non-for-profit experience, private sector experience as a salesman and marketing representative for many medical device companies. And so it's been a really great ride so far.
Well, you know what? You are not a politician. You have not held office before. You've never been a candidate before. And to a certain degree, that's refreshing. What are the advantages of putting someone in office that hasn't been there before?
Well, a couple of different things. I look at my age. I'm 63 years old. Don't mind anybody knowing that. But one of the great things is I've already made a nice nest egg for myself. I don't have to run based on for monetary reasons or looking after my future. I can separate myself from that and strictly focus on the policies and the issues that affect not only the state, but obviously Amherst, New York, and one of the greatest towns ever. So from that standpoint, I think I offer a really nice alternative to that. And especially for those folks that are looking for an alternative candidate that their party no longer represents their issues. Many of my Democratic friends, people that are unaffiliated, are looking for a way to reflect their values. It wasn't the same as our parents growing up, the Democratic Party being that of the working class. Now we're looking at the Republicans and the conservatives looking at the middle class in different ways.
Well, even the average person that's watching the show now has an opinion on what's going on in New York State and locally here in Western New York. And there's all kinds of chatter on social media about problems, problems with, school taxes or real estate taxes or, taxes being too high, wasteful spending, so on, over-regulation, people leaving the state. It's kind of a mess here in New York State. And even if you're a Democrat who is in the majority, you have to admit that things are not ideal.
Correct.
Okay. In your opinion, now you're campaigning to go to Albany. What is the biggest concern that you have in terms of what could or should be done to help the situation in New York State and the people of Western New York?
Well, basically, it's about affordability. I know both sides talk about affordability. It was a big campaign issue in the recent primary cycles, but at the end of the day, affordability affects everything. If we've doubled our budget in the last 10 years under one-party rule, imagine what that will do to your tax burden, your affordability status there, and just little things, policy changes. I mean, it's just amazing to me when you look at the spending that's been going out of control, whether we're spending it on public housing that I think should be reviewed. There's several things there. Our education systems, we have to review those things because, we continue to spend more and more, but we have fewer and fewer students. So how does that equation work out? So there's a lot of things that I think we can look at, especially in the center. I don't think it's a Republican or Democratic issue. There's a lot of things that we come together on. We all want clean air. We all want clean water. We have to address data centers down the road. So there's many things that I think we can come to the middle on and and solutions. But from a number one standpoint, it's affordability. And like I said, we've doubled our budget, and our budget's bigger than Texas and Florida combined. And you know that well as anyone. So when I go door to door, it's affordability, and after that, a very close second would be crime. Mm-hmm. Crime is a huge issue now, especially grand theft auto, and there's plenty of ways to address that as well.
There's a lot there to get into. We'll start with the one-party rule that you mentioned. The city of Buffalo is a prime example. The last time there was a Republican mayor in Buffalo, he served from 1961 through 65. At that point, in 1965, Buffalo had like 530,000 people in the city. 61 years later, every mayor, every person in charge has been a Democrat. Buffalo is now down to 230,000 people. And, it's a shadow of itself. When I got into broadcasting, we were the number 21st largest market in the nation. Now we're like the 53rd or 54th largest market.
Yep.
It's not just because we're shrinking, it's because all the other markets around in Cleveland and in Memphis and Baltimore, they're all growing. And the state has had pretty much one-party rule for years now, and people are leaving the state in droves. And when taxpayers leave the state, but people who are not taxpayers, who are receiving benefits, stay because there's incentives for them to stay, then it's kind of a vicious cycle. Yeah. And it's one of those things where people continue to vote the way they vote, okay, at least the small portion that gets out and votes. Is that, are we doomed? Is that something that will never change?
Well, it's interesting. When's the last time we had the mayor, let's say the city of Buffalo, had a balanced budget? It was probably under Charles Resch back in the 30s. And, going forward, we've all been to Charlie the Butcher's at Worley and the intersection there.
Charlie's a good guy.
Yeah, he's amazing. But if you look at it, I think there's hope out there, though. I think people are finally to the point where they're frustrated enough to finally get out there and vote. And as you know, historically, whether it's a special election or a national election, sometimes we barely get 50% of our voters out, and that's really disturbing because there's so much at stake. And people, you can talk about what you want with voter ID and this and that, but we got to get people energized to get out there and vote.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if we feel as if we're frustrated and we're controlled by government, then we really have only one way to change it. I mean, we can't change it by just talking about it. We have to actually get out and vote.
And so many times when I'm going door to door, the people have told me, hey, as soon as I'm getting my retirement check or this and that, I'm out of here. And it's frustrating because over the last couple of years, we've lost the equivalent of about 700,000 people, which is 5 times the size of Amherst. If you think Amherst is about 138,000 or so, multiply that by 5, and that's the number of people that have left for greener pastures or southern pastures where you're not taxed. Just across the border in Pennsylvania, they don't tax for your clothing. That's a 9 or 10% difference in your cost of clothing. You might not think that's a lot, but over the course of 12 months, that could add up.
Well, I've cited this before on the show. The Business Council of New York came out with a study about a year ago, maybe a little more. And that study showed that in the last 4 or 5 years, the state of New York has lost almost $1 trillion in value to other states. Almost $1 trillion. Let that sink in. I mean, we are in, comparatively with other states like Florida or Texas, Tennessee, a lot of other states, we're in trouble. I mean, we are not doing well. And it's just, you don't see that big picture when you're just concentrating on what's going on here. You're not saying, well, other people are doing better. You're just saying, something's wrong here. I don't quite understand it.
It's like a frog in hot water. It'll stay there until it dies. But look where we were in 1976 when Jimmy Carter was president. We had 41 electoral college votes. We're down to less than, 28 now, if I'm not mistaken. The great Empire State, where did it go? It's a slow trickle. And then now, I mean, in 2022, 2023, we've had our certain leadership in Albany saying, hey, millionaires, people who pay taxes, go ahead and leave. And they did start to leave. And then when they figured out, hey, this is going to have a huge impact on our budget, oh, don't go. But it's interesting. And if, let's say, even too, you talk about costs and just livability and just issues that affect everyday Americans, our economic issues. I mean, imagine being a builder or a contractor. And you have to decide when you're building a building or a home, do you make it all electric? Do you accommodate it for natural gas? Right. These conflicting policies cost money.
That's another whole another subject. We're out of time for this segment. We're going to come back. There's a lot more to talk about, folks, so stay tuned. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to The Big Picture. My guest tonight is Terry McGuire, who's running for State Assembly. He's in Amherst. And one of the things that you had mentioned, other than the economy, was crime. And that's one of the things that I wanted to bring up is the no bail law that was passed a few years back. Someone can steal a car, and that's happened a lot lately, and they can even go on a police chase, maybe crash into and destroy property, and they'll get an appearance ticket. Okay, they don't spend any time incarcerated at all. They get a ticket and they say, okay, you got to show up, later on for court. And who knows whether they show up or where it goes from there. But there doesn't seem to be any consequences because those people, in many cases, go out and steal another car. and another, and another, and they just keep on getting appearance tickets because that's the law. Anything, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the no bail law, and I've done stories on this, anything that's considered non-violent, in other words, you didn't take a shot at someone, you didn't stab someone, you didn't beat them over the head with a club. If it's non-violent, there's no consequences. They release you, they give you an appearance ticket, and they say, you know, that's bad behavior, don't do it again, we'll see you later.
Kind of like shoplifting.
You know, yes, and there's no incentive for somebody to behave if they're oriented towards greed or misbehavior. I mean, there's just, you know, my kids used to do something wrong, they would pay for it.
Right.
And they learned, next time I ain't gonna do that.
Well, if you subscribe to the broken window theory, I mean, look at how New York got cleaned up. They started busting panhandlers and windshield wiper people that were disruptive, graffiti. If you control the little crimes, it'll cascade up. Get a culture of law enforcement. I don't know if you've seen the driving habits of people lately, but that's not good either. But you know, there's a lot of ways to address that. But you're exactly right. If there's no consequences, what's to deter them from doing it all the time? I mean, I ask all the retail stores and how much they lose every year to petty theft. So what do you do about it? Well, maybe one of the things is looking at the raise the age law. You know, so if, you know, there are different conditions. If you're a teenager and you're caught stealing a car, let's let the judge decide whether it becomes a criminal court case or a juvenile court case, or juvie, as we say, and let them figure it out. Because at the end of the day, you know, it's a recent activity up here. We had a very terrible accident, or terrible situation up on Transit Road, where a woman was held at gunpoint and her BMW was stolen. That would fall into the criminal code. Yeah. So put them away, or increase the consequences, get them in jail. If it's something that's a minor thing, or a kid out for a joyride, okay, non-offender, non-systemic offender, then maybe that goes to the family court. But that's one thing that we can do to address that situation.
Well, you're running as a Republican now in Amherst, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Amherst has gotten to be more of a Democrat area. Their supervisor, the town council, I'm not sure what the breakdown is, but
it's 100%.
You know, okay, so what is going on in Amherst? Because that used to be a Republican, you know, area.
You know, over time, you know, there's a lot of theories about that, a lot of changes. You know, I think there's a lot of people that have moved in from the city to take advantage of our school systems, which is great. You know, we have some of the top school systems in Western New York. I think out of the top 10, I think 5 of them are from Amherst, whether it's Williamsville North, South, East, Sweet Home, or Amherst Central itself. So, yeah, it's an interesting change in demographics. You have the university system, where you have a lot of professors and folks from different parts of the world that see the world in a different way. And then you have what I call vertical integration. You have a lot of apartment buildings that are there. And again, people taking advantage, and wisely, I think, of our school systems if they can. But at the end of the day, it has an impact on a lot of things. Your property and school taxes, who's paying those? You know, if you look at our athletics facilities in Amherst, they're outstanding. There's no question. I'd like to see them put a little bit more into the academic rigor, but at the same time, you can't say that if you send a kid to an Amherst school that they're not getting, I think, their great value, because I think they are.
Well, you know, you put your finger on it, I think, to an extent, and that is, and I don't think this is a stretch, but I can say that from my experience, and maybe people can kind of weigh in on this and you know, agree or disagree, but if you are in a Democrat area, whether it's Amherst or New York State, your taxes are going to be higher. And that's because the philosophy of the Democrat Party is government needs to do more for people.
Yes.
Government needs to take care of everybody and make decisions and basically be in control to a greater extent. You know, the Republican Party tends to say, well, you know what, we respect individual choices and people should be in charge of their own economics and their own, where they live and how they work and so on. That's kind of a broad strokes as to how the parties differ. But yes, Democrat areas tend to tax people more and spend more of their money. And that's part of what we decide on when we're voting. We decide on whether we're going to have more of our own money to spend,
right,
or whether the government is going to take care of us and take more of our money to spend it for us.
Yeah, it's a fundamental divide, right? It's really where the rubber meets the road. What is the role of government? What should be the effective role of government?
And I, even if we, I was interviewing a Democrat sitting in that chair, I don't think there would be an argument over that. I mean, that's a philosophy that the two parties basically have. Now, I'm not saying that the Republican Party doesn't spend a lot of money too. I mean, when a politician or a bureaucrat gets into a position of power, they're spending other people's money. And the discipline that comes with spending your own money, it's not there, okay? And so, the waste, and that's why government is renowned for wasting money.
And Phil, maybe that's the fundamental question too, is when you look at different things and how we spend it, maybe we ought to look at, the tenure and how we set up our government. For example, was our jobs as legislators ever meant to be a full-time job? I would argue, right. It goes back to the founding days.
Founding fathers.
You would do your sessions, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 a year. Then you go back to your regular job,
right,
and see how other people suffer under your laws. Because like you said, there's no consequence. Once you get a huge salary or you're behind a certain desk, you treat your money differently. And we have that example too. If you have a son or daughter and you're trying to teach them financial responsibility, and you give them a credit card or you co-sign on a credit card, and they max it out, do you give them another credit card, or do you cut that one up and say, let's have a review of how we're doing things?
Right. I mean, the oversight and the consequences for bad behavior or wasteful behavior doesn't stop with criminals, and bureaucrats have to have responsibility as well. And there's no incentive when you get into a position of power where you can spend other people's money. It takes a very special person to say, you know what, we're spending too much. I need to cut my budget because we don't need to spend this and we don't need to spend that. And I was doing a story with some drug enforcement police many years ago, and it was in the city of Buffalo, and they're all long gone, so I'm not going to offend anybody. But it was I went out with them on a night where they were enforcing drug laws, and they stopped people, and they were looking for illegal drugs and so on. That night, they were at the end of their budget, and it was explained to me in no uncertain terms, if we don't go through all the money we have, then they're going to cut our budget next year. Okay, we need to. So they were out that night handing out $100 bills to informants and stuff, just so that they didn't have any money left over in their budget. Because if they had any money left over, their budget was going to get cut. That's
right.
That's maddening for the average citizen who is fiscally responsible. And it's a matter of holding government accountable.
And I think it's a matter of policy. I mean, they should be rewarded for not using up all their budget. If they have a certain now I'm saying if they didn't use 30% of their budget or whatever, I'd question what's going on there. But if it's within, like you said, you're 2 or 3% away from maxing out, and you got that back to the government, they should receive some kind of recognition or award for doing it. And not be penalized by having to spend all of our dollars, or feeling like they have to spend all of our dollars, which are precious. As you know, I mean, we shrink in population, and guess who's going to be holding the bag at the end of the day? You and I.
We've got about a minute left in the show, and I just want to give you an opportunity to tell the people why they should vote for Terry McGuire for State Assembly in Amherst.
Well, I think I have a unique set of circumstances in terms of my entire career that I can apply to this job, whether it's the private sector, the military sector, the non-for-profit sector, volunteerism. I think I've got a really great background in terms of learning what it takes to make effective change and doing things. I've worked with people of all races and kinds and backgrounds and people from all the world. So I've had a global perspective. I've had a national perspective. I know what it's like in the state because I traveled all across the state as a salesman and as a VA representative for our veterans. So I think I'm pretty well versed on what's going on in New York, especially north of the old Tappan Zee Bridge. Now I think it's still called the Mario Cuomo Bridge, or his dad, or the former governor. So I feel like I've got a great deal of experience to apply to this job and bring it to our Amherst people.
Okay, well, you know what? If I were to invent a party, my party would be the Common Sense Party. Okay, not the Republican Party.
Yes. And my dad used to say that all the time. He was the common sense guy.
Common sense is what we should be voting for. And a non-politician, somebody who's running, that's a head start.
Yeah.
You know, that's to me, you're not looking at things through the political,
right.
That's
what my dad
filter.
used to say. My dad used to say that as the former Amherst supervisor in the town of Amherst. That was his big thing. It's just common sense. It's not right or left. It's let's do the right thing.
That's the bottom line, folks. It's common sense. And when you go out and vote, I would highly suggest that you think in those terms. Republican, Democrat, think about who's running and how much they appeal to your sense of what's right and wrong. Not just a party affiliation. Anyway, we're out of time for this big picture. I want to thank Terry McGuire for being here. I want to thank you for watching the Big Picture. We will see you next time. WBBZ, your local TV station. We appreciate you. We'll see you next time on the Big Picture.
Phil, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.